Okay, awesome. Let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I just want to thank everybody who joined us today. The goal of this is really just have a Ask Us Anything session where, if you have any questions from our team, whether it's, how we build the product, how we look at adding features, how support works, pretty much anything is available to ask. So what we're planning on doing and the way that we want to run it is we did have an option for you to submit a question ahead of time on the invite link. So we have about 22 questions that we got through there. So we're thinking what we'll do is we'll go through one live question and then answer one that was submitted ahead of time, and then just kind of have that workflow for switching between the two. So with that said, let's see if anybody wants to ask the first question via voice. Feel free to unmute, and let's go from there.
Justin, do we want to have them unmute or raise their hand?
Good question.
Might be a little less chaotic.
So let's use the raise hand feature. So if anybody has a question that you want to ask over voice and unmute, if you use the raise hand, and then we'll know that you're kind of in the queue. So. Okay, looks like we have a couple here. Let's go ahead and, all right, quite a few. Okay, so let's start here. Armando, do you want to come off mute and let us know your question?
Yeah, hi. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Thanks for doing this. With your product in particular, it's fantastic. I'm more inclined to just kind of get immersed in it a little bit more. I want to know what additional features I can implement in my environment, mainly because I guess it's in many cases, some of us are just kind of too tied up with getting just standard daily work done that we don't get the chance to improve the product or kind of trim it to our environment. And alongside with that, I know that with patching in general, it gets kind of tricky. So I'm wondering if you have any recommendations as far as what you've seen out there that works best for patching implementation. Like, I don't want to go too far out and get a superseded patch because I decided to do this stuff towards the end of the month, or how do we remedy something like that to not fall into, this limbo of, or we keep getting superseded so we don't get it.
Gotcha. So a couple options. Do you want to cover maybe the setup call, Wes, and kind of how we can review and do a free call with customers? And then maybe I'll jump in on the superseded bit. Might be muted, Wes.
Hey,
there we go.
Hang on a second. Yeah. Hey, Armando, how are you, sir?
Doing good, Wes.
Yeah, good, man. Yeah, I know we work together. And I tell you, we normally can do a setup call, as you well know. We can also do a support call and kind of help you go through that process as well. And you know how to get in touch with me, and we can kind of go through that and help you alleviate some of that headache that you're having to go through. So most definitely a setup call, but then we can also, go through that process. But we can see as far as doing your updates and kind of going with best practice on some of those. Most definitely we can go over that kind of stuff with you just by setting up a support call or even a setup session. So most definitely that.
Yep. And with your question about superseded updates, yes, I mean that's kind of environment specific, right? So I mean the way that our updates work, let's say a new Chrome update comes out, right, and we supersede the previous one. The amount of time that the previous update stays around is going to be based on that supersedence rule that you have within your software update point. So if you wanted to keep those previous updates around because you have a long change management, you would just want to make sure that you have maybe 1, 2, or 3 months. And then that would still give you the ability to deploy any older superseded one while you're going through maybe your typical collections and targeting using that method. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and just a quick example, Java. I have the Java 7.1 that I finally downloaded for December to come into January, but then they released the 2.8.1, so then that got superseded. So it threw my whole patching for January out. Now I got to wait for the 2.8.1 to go out in February. It's a weird concept. That's all.
You can always deploy patches that are superseded. There's nothing stopping you from doing that.
No, I know. That's a different method. It's like I'm assuming everybody has governance. Our governance, applies with creating a ticket, and then that ticket takes 4 weeks to complete. It's the stupidest stuff. So
Lovely change
and,
process.
With Java and specifically, we have had a lot of people ask us to include previous versions of Java, and we've actually considered doing that. So that might be something we add in the future is keeping those previous versions of Java around. The hard part there is the way we can convey that, because it would be different than all of our other products. But we do understand that a lot of customers need to have those older versions of Java available to them, like at all times.
All right, sweet. Okay, so next one. We'll take this one from a pre-submitted question. So this one was from Gerasimos. So what is your plan forward for the future? Do you want to focus on implementing new features or include more apps that can be patched in your catalog? Would also be interested in knowing the percentage of app increase during the last years. So great question. So as far as new apps, in 2019, we added 38 new products to the catalog. In 2020, we added 50. As far as the priority, it really kind of depends, right? So if you go to our ideas portal, so this is where customers basically submit feedback. So there's definitely going to be a lot of both, where we're improving feature set as well as adding to the catalog. We actually have 3 new people in the last month or so. So we are planning to start ramp up even quicker than what we have been doing with new applications. But for example, from ideas.patchmypc.com, which is our user voice where you can go and submit feedback, you can upvote feedback. This would include apps and features. You can also get to our roadmap from here as well. So for example, we usually show about the last 6 months that we have shipped features on, as well as the next couple months of what we're working on. So anything in the dark blue would be a new product that we added, and everything else would be features. So on average, we try to get about 5 new products added per month, and that's going to be based on customer feedback. So it's kind of a mix of, we definitely want to improve feature set based on what our customers are getting, as well as make sure that we get the most valuable apps that our customers want as well. We do also have a KB that kind of describes what is the criteria we look at when we're working through features and applications. One thing that I'll kind of note here is a lot of times, like if it's a small feature, it's probably going to be a lot less time from engineering on our end, because that's going to be something that we only have to do once versus new apps, where we have to maintain that for the life cycle of the app and make sure that we have updates that continuously go out. But it's definitely a mix of both. And we know that customers get value both from feature sets that they request as well as new products. Okay. Let's take Richard. Do you want to come off mute?
Hey guys. So this is a question related to your roadmap there. And the improvements that you guys are always putting in. Can we get a notification when you publish new applications? I don't mean the updates, but I mean, you release support for another application. Can we get an email that says that? How do we subscribe to that sort of thing?
Yep, great question. So best way to do that, if you're at our website, you can go to just the main SCCM and Intune page under Enterprises. Within there, we have a Stay Informed little section, and then we have both newsletter and RSS feed. So, for example, if you get on this newsletter, the way that it works is you'll get notified whenever we have a new catalog update, which is typically 4 to 5 times a week. And that's very similar to the way that you can subscribe to our RSS feed as well. So same type of concept here, where if you do subscribe to RSS feed, you would get that same details. I don't know if I have an RSS feed reader in Edge at the moment, but it would be similar where we would show any updated products as well as any newly added products within the catalog. So,
That's great. Thank you. I didn't know that existed. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's something. It's something that I think we need to communicate quite a bit better because it seems like people often miss they can subscribe to our newsletter. So we'll have to figure out a way to make that more accessible and more easy to see. Okay, next question. Let me pull up one from the deck. Okay, so this one is, what is the difference between an Intune app and an Intune update? So it looks like Adam, do you want to take this away?
Yeah, sure. So this one can be a bit confusing at start because both actually publish or rather appear in the apps blade of Intune. But the real detail comes down to the requirements part. So basically the updates, they have a prefixed sort of string update for, and they only install on devices if A, the product already exists, and B, if the version is less. But the real reason comes down to that requirement section, which Justin, if you can just highlight that whole section there. So that's a PowerShell script which runs on the device before the update process kicks in to determine that logic. Is the software installed? Is the version less? Whereas on the flip side, whether it's an app, there is no update for in the name, and equally, there's no requirement set at all. So it's just freely installing. So that's how we control and stop updates from actually installing the software as if it were a new install.
Yep. And in addition to that, what I'll do is just jump over here. I'm also going to include a link to, here we go. So third-party updates. I'll include a link in the window that came out when we released the updates feature. It kind of deep dives into how we came about using the requirement rules. So let me just paste that here. And this is an interesting read, like if you want to go a little bit deeper into how we came about developing this feature and really why it was one of the only options, because there's not really native scanning for updates within Intune. So this one could be an interesting read for you to kind of go through our thought process when we started thinking, how can we actually patch updates or applications in Intune? So that's in the chat window as well for you. Okay. All right, let's do Tim Mills, if you want to come off mute.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Thanks for putting this on. Your product really is a lifesaver. We're looking at slowly migrating from SCCM based to Intune, and my curious is, what do you guys have any method or approach to pilot moving client apps, specifically updates, from Software Center to Intune, via the company portal? When we first kind of did it in Intune pilot, we broke all of the Patch My PC patching, and then since then you guys have put out the whole Intune kind of component. We haven't started that yet, and before we started, I was hoping you might have some guidance on the best way to approach it methodically so that we can move a couple of clients over, make sure everything works, and then go from there.
Yeah, great question. I think Cody, you may have had a similar one. Do you want to cover this one?
Yeah. So the nice thing about the updates that we do in Intune is, with them just being a Win32 app, if you are kind of transitioning between managing with Configuration Manager and then doing updates through Software Center and WSUS, if you move the client app's workload over to Intune, it doesn't just strictly allow Intune for apps. It lets Intune and SCCM do that. And so at that point, right, then it's up to you to start kind of scoping your assignments and deployments. So you could remove your these devices you want to pilot with, remove them from your third-party update patches that they're receiving from SCCM, and you could start targeting them with assignments from Intune. And you can still, if you want, you can still do Windows updates from WSUS and ConfigMan, or you can flip to WFB. You can use Windows updates for business alongside those Intune patches. And we've also seen the flip. We've seen some customers that, which is going on in the chat here, they want to do WFB for their Microsoft updates. They want to do SCCM for third-party updates. So those are all kind of options. I mean, the real crux, or not crux, the real advantage is with client apps, you can flip that over to Intune, and you can still get apps from SCCM like you always have, but you can also get our kind of Intune updates from Intune, and that would be your transition.
Yeah, and just to add like some interesting context just internally. So, we're a relatively small company. So when we were actually developing the Intune updates feature internally, one of the big factors of, hey, we can't put our entire, company, which probably 15 to 20 devices that we manage, on Intune because we can't patch third-party apps. So when we were actually developing this feature, this was one of the things that we're like, okay, we're going to move all our workloads over to Intune and make sure we get this feature right. So internally, we were kind of dog fooding, what does it look like to move into Intune updates? Do we have the quality factor right? Do we have our detection right? So that was one of the things that we were actually evaluating is what does this actually look like internally, and how could customers potentially do this if it made sense at some point to go into that direction. So hopefully that helps. Okay, let's see. Alrighty, next one is how do you create icons for your applications? Andrew?
Yep. So first I look into Google. I search Google for the icon. I try to find the icon on their website, typically PNG. If that fails, there's a really nice utility from, I think it's Nearsoft, and it's called Icons Extract. And this will actually Icons Extract, and that can actually pull the icon files out of EXEs, and then from there I just convert them to a PNG. Try to get the biggest one I can. Typically, when icons don't look good, I'm the one that updates them. So feel free to reach out if an icon is ugly and let us know, and we'll make it look pretty.
And we do have to be conscious of licenses associated with these icons too. That we have to make sure that we're allowed to use them.
Okay, awesome. So that was a pre-submitted. Let's do Ian. Do you want to come off mute?
So I have a question with regards to Ivanti versus you guys. When you get your third-party patches, how soon do you get them?
Yeah, good question. So for almost all of them is usually the same day. What is this cadence? Generally speaking, regardless of whether it's a security bug, feature update, it's almost always the same day. There are a few exceptions to that. So, if a vendor released an update, for example, let's say like 5 p.m. Mountain Time, and it's not security, that's one that we would push off to the next business day. But for the most part, we almost get updates out the same day that vendors release them, regardless of the classification of the update that it is. So hopefully that helps the kind of release cadence. Was that the only one kind of cadence of how quick we release, or do you have anything else around that?
No, that's basically it. And do you, I'm kind of new to this Patch My PC, and is it a plugin that you install with SCCM, or is this like, is that, I don't have your, I'm still not a customer, but basically,
Yep, yeah.
So I'm interested.
That's a great question. Yeah. So basically from like a perspective of how do updates and apps actually appear.
You're on mute, Justin.
Oh,
You're muted, Justin.
Let's see. There we go. Okay, cool. So as far as how we get updates there, we have a small utility. So this is a Windows service. It would run on your software update point. It's a couple megabytes, so super lightweight. So the way that it works is you essentially do a one-time setup, And if you want to get on a call with our team, we do have like a free setup call or a free demo, depending on which one you want to do first. Demo, we would basically walk you through exactly what it looks like to set up. On a setup call, we could get on and actually help you in your environment set it up. So essentially, there's a one-time setup. You would come in here, you would choose which updates you want to publish to Config Manager, which applications that you want to create in Config Manager. So we do both updates and apps. So updates would probably be what you're familiar with if you're using Avanti today. They just come in as a third-party update, but then we also do Config Manager apps. So this would allow you to not have to manually package apps for initial deployment, and we also keep those up to date. So within our tool, you would come in, same thing for Intune apps and updates, it all runs on the same tool. And then the automation comes into play where you would choose how often you want to check for new updates, and then you could get new email or Teams alerts whenever anything changes in your site. So once you configure this the first time, you're pretty much good to go. From that point, the thing that happens is within Config Manager, they just auto appear. So you'd see the updates show up here. You would use all your existing workflows, ADRs, update groups, searches. And then from the apps perspective, same thing here. Right, so we would automatically package these apps. You could then use task sequences. You could use collections. We would have, I know we had the question about icons, so it would look great in Software Center. Pretty much everything would be pre-filled for you. So from a setup perspective, it usually takes under an hour. And once you get it set up the first time, for the most part, unless you want to go make a manual change, everything just runs in the background and it just has updates and apps auto appearing.
Cool. Can I ask one more?
Yeah, sure.
A few more.
Yeah.
Question: When we have issues with reporting with SCCM, how quickly? Because we have a huge environment, right? We have, I would say around 40,000 endpoints. How quickly are you able to pull the compliance for those for that? How can you get it? How often with that kind of infrastructure?
Yeah. Do you want to? Oh, sorry.
Like Windows and third party.
Do you want to cover this, Cody? Maybe the scan cycles and state messages and how that all flows?
Yeah. So we're not doing anything different than the updates you're already applying. So if you're seeing issues with the rate of reporting, you might have, whether it's some sort of bottleneck in your environment, or you've got some issues with inbox backlogs, state messages not getting passed along. So we're using all built-in mechanisms. The reporting and compliance information that you're going to get is going to follow the exact same path that your Microsoft updates are, that your Avanti updates would, that your Dell and Lenovo third-party catalogs would. It's all the same. They're all based off state messages and such. I think it's like a default to every 15 minutes. You can kick it along by restarting the CCM exec service. So we're kind of at the mercy of all of the functionality within the product. Justin is showing some of the reports we do provide. These are free. They're included with our product, but you can also install them yourself if you just install the publisher. We've got an article that talks about it. So we've got a few high-level dashboards that also link into some collections. There are some for third-party updates and some for all updates. But again, it's, the rate at which this happens is completely dependent on your environment. There's nothing we're doing to expedite or change that.
One last question.
Sure.
The $2 per device per year, does that include the SCM application service, or is it like there's cost to every? What other cost would this $2 per year? Is there additional cost for subscribing to other kinds of features in Patch My PC or?
Yeah, great question. So as far as the cost goes, the $2 feature, that's going to get you the updates. So for example, this would get you the third-party updates within Config Manager. Now, if you did want the apps, that would be the Enterprise Plus. So basically, if we're looking at our tool, I see. Let me see if I can open that up. So if you only cared about patching, Just for context, the vast majority of our customers are on Enterprise Plus, which would get them this tab here, which would allow them to package apps even if they don't exist. Enterprise, which would be the $2 versus the $350 for Plus, that would simply get you the update so you could patch machines that already have apps installed. So that's the difference between those two.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Cool. Yep.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, let's jump over. So here's a fun one. This one's a pre-submitted one. So are there any features that we haven't heard about yet? Great question. Let me kind of show one that we are currently working on, at least pull up the web page. So we've been getting a lot of feedback about having some interactive notifications, right? So what that means is when an update or when an application is currently running by a user, we want to be able to let them know, hey, there's an update that's about to apply for that application. You're going to have to close this and give like maybe a countdown of like 5 minutes or something. So this is one internally we've started to develop, or we were starting to develop internally and running some tests. Not something we're going to, I'd say that we're totally committed to at this point, but things are looking pretty good. So the goal is that we'll have a new right-click option. So let me show you what that's going to look like. Where's my window? Here we go. So today we've already got some options where you can come in and you can choose a product, and then you can choose whether or not you want to auto close the app. So this is all in the background, so it would just automatically close it. The user wouldn't be notified, or you can skip the update if the app is in use. So what we're currently working on is hopefully another right-click option that would say, let me interactively notify the user that this is about to close down. And the goal of that is to make sure that for some of the apps where if they are running, they would fail. Now, this certainly isn't all apps. A lot of apps can work while in use. You just may get a pending restart exit code, for example. But for some of those problematic apps, the goal is like, hey, you could notify the user that you're going to have to close this app because it's about to be updated. So this is one that we're working on. And we think it's going to be a pretty valuable one. We know that we've got a ton of customer votes and a lot of traction on that one. So that's one that hopefully will be coming up soon, assuming we don't hit any roadblocks. Okay, let's go.
Hey, this is Hajit. Can I jump in?
Sure.
So that is a great feature to add for sure. My feedback on that is that if a user is prompted to close before it can upgrade, I mean, there are chances that a user is not going to initiate that. So would that be like a timer based, like, you have, X number of hours or X number of minutes before to shut it down before we initiate the upgrade? I think that's important to have, right? Just like Windows software updates.
We do have that. So there are options that will be included, such as allow X number of deferrals, allow for deferral until X number of days after the deadline, like a few options. So yeah, you'll definitely be able to ensure that it does install. It won't just continue to fail forever. So it'll force the install. The idea is to hopefully give them the illusion of choice, right? Let them be a little bit more selective about when it happens, and then push comes to shove, it's going to patch.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thanks.
Okay. Was that last one a slide, or is that a voice question? It was a slide, right? About the interactive. So let's go to voice. Let's do, how about George Simus, if you want to come off mute. Simus George.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, sounds good.
Hello. Thank you very much for the great product, first of all. I wanted to ask two questions. The first one is about your supported products page. It would be nice if we could embed this in our own intranets so we can provide them to the users and tell them, you can search in this list for an application that you are interested. So, but it should be dynamic, It should be the same as the list you have online, which I don't know how often do you do update it. So if there is a way to have this thing as embedded in our own intranets, it would be great.
Andrew,
I don't know if you have something or if you're planning to do something.
Any thoughts on that one, Andrew? Like, I know we keep CSV.
So we try to update it about once a month. It's a little out of date right now. We're honestly trying to automate this page entirely. So anytime we add a new product, we want it to update on this page. So we're working on the automation on the back end for that right now, or putting it like in your like intranet, like for your users. I'm honestly not sure how we would accomplish that.
Like, would you be able to download like a CSV file and somehow have a routine that would put that in internally? I'm just trying to think of how that would work, because we do have a CSV
we can provide
today.
So that table's filled out via CSV. We provide an Excel file, but we could totally provide that CSV as well.
Yes, maybe that could be a good solution.
Okay. Yeah, so we can totally provide the CSV as well as a link on that page. It's actually, it seems like a simple like problem to solve, but the like list of applications that we have, there's like so many different versions, and there's EXEs and MSIs, and so we kind of have to filter it down so that so it doesn't look like we're like packing the list full of a bunch of apps and say that they're different apps, but they're actually all the same. Because in our publisher, 7-zip is like 4 different apps, but we only want to show it once in on that supported products page,
Yes. Okay. This could this be also this list in an RSS feed format, so we can just retrieve it and parse it as we want and display it as we want.
We can play around with that.
Yeah, shoot me an email,
like
Justin.
Oh, you want me to send you a...
Yeah, send me and Andrew an email like of your ideal, like this is how we could query this data and what would work best for you. I think that would be...
We could actually, or we could do like a JSON.
Yeah, I think
on there.
Yeah, I think JSON would probably be a good option.
Probably put up a JSON file on there. Maybe that's what we'll do.
Cool.
Yeah, and it gets reflected with every change you're doing every now and then. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Very good thinking. Okay, now I have a question that is mostly technical. I have started working with Patch My PC in the last month, and I saw something that I wanted to ask how you do the discrimination in SCCM. There is a feature you have that scans the SCCM database and gives you the applications that are already installed in your environment, so you can create updates or applications. I have seen in the list that I had, for example, the exact same number for EXE setups and EXE applications and MSI-based applications. Is there a relation between them? Is this something that needs to be, remediated by your side because it's getting things complicated? Because right now I cannot understand what's the current situation, and I need to focus, for example. Yeah, something like this.
Yeah. So what's going on here is we're only able to scan what is provided based on hardware inventory, and for a lot of these apps, there is not a lot that distinguishes them on MSI versus EXE. I've got some other code bases where I'm doing some queries, checking if there's like a product code associated with it to check if it is MSI or executable. But at this time, it's not out there in production. So I think we actually do have a user voice for this. But from a patching perspective, what we do see a lot of customers do is they will generally end up enabling both, and then they let the client decide. So it's not uncommon for customers to have both the EXE and the MSI version of, say, VLC or 7-Zip or these apps that have both versions, and they're not actually sure what's out there in their environment themselves. And so our applicability rules, the rules on the updates, actually have logic to only patch the necessary version. So while we do want to improve the scan, it doesn't impact the actual updating functionality. The scan just gives you a good high-level overview of some recommended software you should patch. It's not necessarily meant to be a 100% on-point inventory of the software in your environment. Now, it is reflecting the names of software, but sometimes those minor details, we have to do some data normalization because vendors are just terrible about how they store their names and versions. And so we do our best to normalize, but this comes down to data normalization.
Okay.
Yep, and just to tie into that point, so you might want to mute somebody as well.
Ask what other network security.
Yeah, you want to mute there. So just to tie back on what Cody already mentioned, that scan is really just, hey, this is what you probably want to enable, and we're kind of limited to what's in SCCM. Once you actually enable that product, we can get much more detailed in our applicability checks on the client side. And if you had an EXE of 7-Zip and an MSI, once you have the update appearing, it would be correct detection, but we're kind of limited in our scan with how does it actually show and add or remove programs, which reports up via hardware inventory. So hopefully that scan will help you know, hey, I probably have this app and I need to enable it. But then once it publishes, you'll get very specific on, is it actually EXE or MSI? And then the updates can apply there. Okay, let's move to the next one. So this one is, what's the best way to handle phased deployments of apps and updates? I think this is you, Adam.
Hi, yeah, it is. Let's probably start with Intune, because that's probably easier to consume. Can you jump to Intune? So the way that you can do this in Intune is that you can, if you right-click Option on a product, a vendor, or at your all products level, you can choose Manage Assignments. And if we add, say, 2 AAD groups here, because this is a list of, add another one if you can, just one more, as like a hypothetical scenario, do like Contoso IT if it's in there or something. Cool. So clicking on one of those would give you the assignment editor. And you can kind of control the availability sort of offset from the point at which the app or the update is released, as well as, say, hypothetically, the availability is 3 days, and then you would put the deadline as like 5 days. So then, and then you would have your broader group as, further than that. So then with that concept, you have your update rings, right? You would have the one group with an immediate availability or the other group with a longer, further out into the future availability. That there is the same for Intune updates or Intune apps. You can have the same functionality with the right-click option. In ConfigMan, there's 2 ways you could probably do this. So you can do, so Justin's showing the create phase deployments. This is a feature in ConfigMan that's native. And the idea is that you would choose your collections of your rings, so your pilot, your broader pilot, and then your production collections, and then you would define a criteria of when you would like to progress through those collections, whether that's a % of compliance. So in other words, I want to progress to the second collection after 90% compliance or the X number of days. That's one way. You can do that also, not just for software updates, but applications. The same idea, phase deployments, you right click, as Justin is, create phase deployment, the same logic, choose your collections and so on. But I don't know about the majority of the people on the call, but I personally prefer just working purely out of ADRs here and have multiple deployments associated with your ADRs so that you would, instead of depending on your compliance stats in order to be the determining factor when you progress through your collections, make it time-based so that you would have your first wave with a different deployment schedule in your ADRs to be, immediate. That could be your IT folk, for example. And then, 3 days broader, and then beyond that, pilot. So then you would do that based on time, right? So then you would say, well, the availability would be immediate for this deployment, whereas the deadline would be +1 day. And if you do the same, maybe on exactly, and then go to the schedule, you'll see the deadline is actually 7 days. So that would be my personal preference instead of phased deployments. I would prefer the time-based rather than the compliance being the determining factor, because what if you had devices that were offline, and there may be scenarios where it will take quite a while to hit 90% compliance to then start going into your second pilot and then into your broader pilot. But yeah, I hope that answers it.
Cool. Let's jump to Dell. You want to come off mute and...
Hey guys, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it and love your product. You guys have saved me so many hours, I guess so many days of work that I don't have to go and make all these applications and patch packages and that sort of thing. And the ADR, I use the ADR method as well with the time-based for deploying to multiple phases. My question is, are there any WSUS fine-tuning rules beyond those what Microsoft has already put out that helps patch my PC?
Yeah, that's a good one. So for the most part, if you are, enabling the task to decline and clean up, that does a pretty good job. So that's gonna, when an update gets superseded and then when it gets declined, or once an update is superseded, it will decline so that clients don't actually scan against it, right? So, I mean, that's definitely a huge one. In the demo lab, we don't have these enabled, but this gets you in a very good state from like scanning and performance. For the most part, for clients that we see, out of about 2,500 or so from publishing, we only see maybe timeouts on maybe 3 a day. Which a timeout would mean WSUS isn't responding, which generally means like IIS is overloaded. So once this feature came out, we saw, big decline. So as far as health of WSUS, this gets you in a really good spot. The only other thing I'll mention, which will also cover another question, is what about cleanup? So there is a feature that we have. So when you decline an update, it will clean it out of the WSUS content folder once the WSUS maintenance runs through that task. So that will get you in a good content state where it cleans up a good amount of content. But there's also this update services packs folder. Now, what can happen here is this is kind of like a temporary folder where binaries get downloaded. So for example, here's a Chrome. Here's a cab that contains that Chrome when it signs it. So there's some duplication here. And this one by default does not get cleaned up. So what we can see sometimes customers may open a case saying, hey, I have a ton of content in update services packs. And I think a lot of this is old and declined and deleted. So we do have this tool that can help you clean up WSUS for the update services packs folder, which isn't one that happens automatically. So you can come in here and use the scan unreferenced updates. And within our UI, there's a more info link that goes into a video. And we also have a KB post about this as well. So this is a big feature that if you are having space issues with WSUS, we've seen customers save hundreds of gigabytes of space by running this cleanup that natively doesn't happen. And to tie up on another question related to this, one of them was, can we make this automated? So we do have a user voice for making the update services packs cleanup automated. I think that's one that we might have updates as planned. Let's see, cleanup. But that's probably one of the big ones that from a WSUS cleanup, as long as you have
that one, number 4 votes, a lot of scheduling.
Yeah, so this is one where, we may make this automated so you don't have to go into our wizard. But as long as you have that checkbox from like a scan and performance, that seems to do a very good job. If you get a lot of content that you need to clean up, that's where this additional feature can really help out. But yeah, I would say we see very few issues if you have the built-in maintenance configured.
And then, so a lot of customers ask me, like, have you ever had issues having that built-in maintenance configured? And I've never seen any issues with that. I know it's a question I get asked almost every time, but having all three boxes checked has never caused any issues as far as I know.
The only issue I have, I guess, seen, it's kind of a non-issue. Once they're checked, it's common for customers that have a ton of updates in their list to start seeing timeouts during their syncs, and it's timing out during the cleanup because you have so many superseded and declined updates that have never been cleaned up. Talking tens of thousands sometimes. So in that case, we've helped customers to go through the WSUS maintenance guides that they provide on docs, and when you use those doc guides, it walks you through manually creating the indexes and manually running some T-SQL to go and kind of do an initial cleanup. So it's kind of a non-issue, right? You're still syncing, it's just that cleanup's failing. So it will throw some errors if that happens.
Sweet. Okay, next one from the deck. Add XML profiles to Cisco AnyConnect deployment. Andrew?
Yeah, so we have, you can use the right-click options for pre- and post scripts to handle this one. Justin was bringing up that KB article. So we have a kind of like an overview of how to do the additional files for the pre- and post update scripts here. I use Notepad++ here, but you can definitely use the same sort of, what is it called? You can use the same sort of guide to do things for Cisco AnyConnect. You minimize, Justin, so we can see the article. And so this kind of walks through how to create that that script, as well as add those additional files. Go ahead and show the right-click option for the additional files, pre-post scripts. So you can have multiple files in here. You can do additional files and just have those, and they'll end up in the package when PatchMyPC creates the app or update. And then all you need to do is, so this could be, say this is that XML file, and then all you have to do is have a PostScript to copy that XML file to the location that you want.
Or to follow up on that, if you don't mind, Andrew, but also the modify command line option, right? Maybe some installers might want to consume further configuration as an additional parameter.
Exactly.
I'm just not too sure how Cisco AnyConnect actually works, whether it wants it on the command line or whether it needs it in a particular directory on disk.
I do believe you copy the XML into a directory. It's been a long time since I've messed with that customization.
We did also add the variable you see listed down below there, %current dir %. So there are occasions when you simply just want to pass a parameter to the installer and you want to reference file you've included. So right here, you can do %current dir %setup.ini. So this one's interesting. Sometimes you'll have to play with it a little bit just because every vendor handles it differently. Current dir could or could not have spaces if you've got other stuff going on with subfolders. So, but
maybe
it's
quotes
good
in
option.
there.
Quotes, yeah, double, single.
All right.
Cool. Yeah, hopefully that helped. Okay, let's go back to a question on Teams. Jump over. Let's use. Okay, let's do Dean. If you want to come off on mute.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Just a quick question here about, do you guys have any plans to do anything with driver updates? I know there's a lot of third-party applications out there, like the Driver Automation Toolkit and all that stuff that will help integrate, patching, just getting drivers and updates. Do you guys have any plans to bring something in that to the product?
Good question. Answer is no, at least not really. So the driver feature of Config Managers actually got pretty good. So we do have a video guide that we did at a user group that kind of talks about how to enable it. And so basically, with the new categories feature that came out in the V3 catalogs within Config Manager, it becomes a lot more manageable to just use the built-in free Dell, HP, Lenovo driver catalogs. So I don't know strategically what the amount of work that would take and focus it would take away from kind of our core, product focus, which is third-party apps. No plans to really do that specific feature set, mainly because it's just already available for free, especially with the ability to now have automation with Config Manager. Do you remember the build, Andrew, that they came out with the automation? Like 1910 or
1910 or the one right after that. I do want to say that in addition to this, we are looking to have I think all of the major vendors also have their own app. Like Dell has a Dell Command Update. Lenovo has an app for that as well that runs on the endpoint that can manage the drivers for you. We are looking to have all of those in Patch My PC at least. So you have a way of getting those applications onto the devices and those applications up to date, and then those vendor applications can do the work for you.
Gotcha. All right. Thanks, guys.
But yeah, I came from a university and we had 300 Dell models, and I'm never doing that again.
Nice.
Alrighty, next one from the PowerPoint. How do you identify freeware like FileZilla that's been embedded with adware? Do you run A/B checks against packages? And what happens for false positives? So this is a good one. I'll cover this. So basically what we do internally, if you look at our FAQ, just in case you want to reference this guide, we do have a section about how our update binaries tested for malware. So basically what happens is every time we release a catalog update 5 times a week, we have security checks that we do. So we will scan every single binary installer through VirusTotal, and we will include the results of every single scan that comes out. And we also host every scan on our website. So for every binary that we post, you'll be able to come in here and see scan results. As far as false positives, like sometimes that happens, we just kind of evaluate like how many engines are hitting that false positive. Is it ones that are more aggressive than others? And depending on what we get with that, it might be we postpone a day just for definitions to get better. But every single RSS, so this is our RSS feed, for example, where you can monitor new updates as well as new products that we add. We will include the virus detection ratio in that post. And you can, if you subscribe to that newsletter we talked about earlier, we also will include that in the email as well. So for example, you could say, let me go look at the current VirusTotal scans for the binary that was released into our catalog. And you can actually see current as well, just in case something changed. So we do have that process. Every single binary that we post goes into VirusTotal. And then from kind of the security side, there are hash checks that go into place just to make sure, like, if a vendor ever got compromised and there was a change within the binary for our download URL, it wouldn't match the hash of when we created it, for example. So that's always a check that would happen in addition to the VirusTotal scans. Alrighty, let's jump back to our teams. Where are we at here? Okay, let's go to Alex, if you want to come off on mute.
Hey guys.
Hey.
So our environment right now, as it stands, is very SCCM. We, as the rest of the world, are exploring the cloud and Intune and all the fancy new tools there are. But we're finding from initial findings, I guess, is our reporting and auditing of installed updates, wherever it's apps or WSUS, is rubbish compared to SCCM. Is there anything in terms of that we can pull into like Power BI to give us a bit more information from Intune, or would you recommend SCCM for the time being?
Yes, good question. So we are doing our best to make it easier. So there's definitely a lack of reporting in Intune when you're trying to report things in bulk. So we do have a Power BI report. Somebody could paste that in the window, but basically the way it works is within our publisher. So let's say that you're using our publisher for Intune. You come in here and you go to options and then you click run the Intune app manager. So what this will do, this will pull down statistics about the updates in the apps, including how many have it installed, how many need it, and how many don't need it. So what happens is you run this tool, you can then export that to a CSV file, and then we have a Power BI template that you can download. And then from here, you can actually see, that's the Intune patching. Yep. So you can see how many updates are required and how many are compliant or installed. So we tried to translate kind of the way that you get compliance within Config Manager and translate that into an Intune consumable way. Now we know that we can get some improvement. So for example, we can go into required and we can see which updates are required, but we don't get into the device level today. That's mainly because some limitations in what we can see in Microsoft Graph at the device level, but it's something that we're working through to see if we could get very specific, where like if you broke down into required, maybe you could see device level stuff. But definitely the Power BI dashboard is a good start where you can actually see, what is the overall compliance looking like for patches. And that would be a feature that we use within our publisher. We query graph in bulk for all the apps and updates that are deployed. And then we'll show you overall what's your compliance. So it's certainly not in the detail that you would get with Config Manager just because the data isn't there for us to grab today. But we do want to keep continuing and improving the way that we can expose compliance in Intune in a good way. And this Power BI report is definitely a great start for you to at least understand how you're doing against all your devices. Okay, cool. Any follow-up to that, or is that good, helpful? Do you know about the Power BI?
Yeah, we use Power BI to query SCCM at the moment. We don't use your report, we use Microsoft's one, but we from an upper management point of view, all they're looking at is statistics, and they want to know exactly what's going on in their environment, whether it's compliant or not. And that's what we're trying to give them as much as possible.
Yep. So this should definitely help for that, from an Intune perspective, where you can see those compliance reports. And this is, you can go do this today. This has been out probably 3 or 4 months now for Intune for us. Okay, let's look at our next question here. Okay, so it would be nice if we had a KB article talking about Windows Update for Business and how that works if you're in a dual scan scenario for third-party updates. So this question was from Brett. Good question. Jason Sandys, he did write a pretty detailed blog post that does cover this pretty well. Let me include this in the chat window. But we will kind of look to see if it could make sense where maybe we could have more actionable settings, maybe a KB from ourselves. But this one is pretty good as far as letting you know your options if you do have scanning going out to Windows Update, how you can still patch third-party updates within a dual scan scenario. So this is definitely a great blog that should help at least get you knowing what needs to happen for that scenario and how that would work. Okay, let's come to another one on voice. Now we are getting close to the end as far as the scheduled time. From our team's perspective, like totally fine to stay longer. We'll probably keep answering, but we do want to be respectful of your time. So if you do need to jump just because it was scheduled for an hour, totally fine. But just because we're getting a bunch of questions, like we can hang out here a bit longer and keep going for those that don't have a time cap. Okay, let's do Tim Mills.
Hey guys, appreciate the second question. So we're looking to utilize the flash removal tool that you guys offer. I just had a couple of questions on does it take care of everything, or is it really the Microsoft WSUS KB they posted? And if not, is it taking care of Flash inside of Chrome, Firefox? And then to follow up on that, I'm not positive how to pull one specific update, since it's not an application, one specific update, and not have it go to my entire collection if we kind of want to roll this out in a smaller venue. So all the questions around how to handle this flash removal tool you guys offer.
I can answer what it is. It is specifically, it is the flash removal tool from Adobe. So it's going to remove the versions that they install. It's not going to remove like the Windows components. So I would use it in tandem with the WSUS Adobe removal. This is going to remove, I believe it removes the three that we have in here, the PPI, NPAPI, and the ActiveX installers. It is literally their flash removal tool from Adobe's website.
So in that case, that it is that tool, is the recommendation then to uncheck and stop downloading the other flash tools and remove the config manager app? I'm just kind of looking for like a methodology or a workflow to kind of go from where we are now to deploying that and not making sure that I uninstall it and then patch it or have it
good
circle back.
That's kind of hard.
Good. Yeah, to follow up on that one, I think it depends. Yeah. So like maybe you have half of your machines that still need Flash. Maybe there's a legacy app, right? So for that one, maybe you want to keep the original update that's the latest version before it went deprecated deployed. And then maybe you want to target just the one removal update to everybody else. So once it gets removed, the actual latest update will no longer show applicable, but it would at least keep the ones that still have it up to date. So it probably depends on internally, like, do you still need it in some places? But where you don't need it, I don't see any issues why you couldn't target that. Is that kind of the track you were thinking, Cody?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to. You just need to break it out. So if you've got an ADR, make sure you
exactly.
If you
that's
don't
what I'm
want
doing
this.
now.
Okay, so I mean, you can use the type. We have an article. I think Justin can probably find it kind of quickly about minusing updates out of an ADR. You can just use a title filter. So that would let you not do it automatically and then do it however you want.
That was my chicken and egg, right? I wasn't sure how to check it off in Patch My PC to get it and not have it go out via the ADR.
Yeah.
So you want to mine that update
good question.
Deployment.
Yeah.
But you can still so it'll still be available as a download. It just won't get wrapped up into a SUG and deployed.
Yep. So let me include this link. This specifically talks about how to exclude. Here you go.
And I think an important note here is that the update we're talking about here has nothing to do with the Microsoft KB. This is completely separate. This does something that the Microsoft KB does not. This is the Adobe Flash Removal tool for the additional plugins. This is not the Windows integrated feature of Adobe Flash.
Yeah. So I think it's essentially these two here. The one that's built into Windows 10 is their ActiveX component for IE. So this could get rid of the additional two for like Chrome, Firefox, or other type of browsers. Yeah.
And do you know if this deploys and the person has the browser open, does it just shut the browser down to suck out these bits, or what's the user experience on this one?
If you have the kill application, right-click on it, will close. It will close the browsers. If you don't, it will likely fail the uninstall.
Yeah, and I suspect that's probably if Flash is actively
and that's
in
only
use.
if Flash is running. Yeah. So I don't think any of the browsers are actively running Flash anymore. So you should be able to deploy it without any user-facing issues unless they're running Flash.
Okay. So basically, go into the ADR, minus out the update. Go into the config, the Patch My PC utility, check it as an update, kick off a sync cycle to get it down. Then I'll have it. I can then deploy that as a SUG as however often I want and phase that into a test. Okay.
Yep.
And then are you guys doing anything with the Microsoft tool, or are you going to kind of leave that up to Microsoft to handle?
Yeah, I don't think we plan to touch the Microsoft removal update. Like that should just work directly as an update through the console. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Sweet. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Cool.
This was awesome.
Sweet. All right, next one. Should we transition PMPC updates from SCCM to Intune, or does Intune updates functionality need more time? So this is ultimately a very personal business decision. Like, does it make sense to go to Intune now, or does it not? Like feature sets, they're definitely not on par. So from our perspective, like Intune updates, like are prime time ready to go. So we transitioned our small environment into Intune, and it's working really great. As far as whether it makes sense for your company, like I think that really depends. Does Intune meet the needs? Like Will it help you maybe, have more features like some of the security things that maybe you get, or maybe you could even use co-management. So I think it really just depends on your organization, whether or not it makes sense to transition to Intune updates. But from our product perspective, it's there and it's ready to update third-party apps in a automated fashion for sure. Okay, let's go to Donald.
Hi, guys. So we've been using the cloud-based Power BI service to generate reports and dashboards utilizing queries against the on-prem SCCM SQL database. Is there a Patch My PC Power BI template available for this scenario?
No. Yeah, there's no Power BI template available. What we usually kind of demo is, just using the config manager one that you can download from their template. But with that said, we will have a new hire announcement coming out soon that does a lot in reporting in Power BI. So we might look at maybe having a Power BI option for config manager in the future. So hopefully that helps. But good question.
Thanks.
Okay, let's look at, do we have Oleg in here that asked this question about app deployment? We might need a little context to make sure we understand which part, like whether that's config manager or Intune.
Configuration manager.
Good question. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So right now we've chatted with a couple customers about this one. It's kind of an interesting question. So one thing to note is that if the default options are set, we will retain existing deployments. So any that you create on these apps are going to be maintained. What is I think the idea that Justin highlighted mentions like a user test collection. What's the use case you have for our product kind of creating the deployments? If you can elaborate a little.
Yes, of course. Let's say we have an IT team who is supposed to test a new version, and let's say they get it from Software Center.
Yeah. And then you would be using the create new app each time setting, then you wouldn't be updating the same one. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. So I think the big thing for us is we don't want to get in the business of creating collections, but creating deployments is something I think we could do. If you have create new app, you could create new deployments to a specified collection. But creating collections themselves, we likely would want to avoid, just to avoid collection sprawl.
Cool. So probably you're looking for something similar to what we have in Intune, where you can come in, you could add a collection, you could choose whether it's available or required, and that would primarily help you out with testing groups and having staging go out is what you're thinking there?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, for sure.
Yep, okay, got the use case, makes sense. We do have it as planned. I don't know how soon it will be till we ship it, but that makes sense. Totally got it. Okay, let's go to another voice. Spencer, do you want to come off mute here?
Hey, so my question, first, thanks for hosting this meeting and everything. So we noticed that there is a small limitation that the console has to exist like on the server, and you have to connect to the server to actually do anything. Is there like any planned implementation of either making a client that we can use on our systems and connect to it, like maybe over the like the import module behavior that configuration manager supports, or maybe some kind of server instance that we can maybe have like a web front end and use that?
We're thinking about it. Like how often do you find that you come back into the publisher to make changes? Like, is it pretty frequent, or?
Well, we're still very early, like still setting it up and stuff. So we're kind of like checking things, testing the app, unchecking, and then redoing. So we're doing a lot now for testing. But yeah, once we have it set up in production fully, I doubt we'll be doing it as much. My main concern, though, actually, this kind of falls under a separate question now. If two people, because it's like on a server, it allows multiple logins at the same time. If people are using the app at the same time, what kind of happens if they make conflicting changes?
Yeah, good question. So we do only allow one instance of it to run, just to avoid that type of conflict.
We've actually seen different, because me and a coworker both logged in and tried making changes simultaneously, and they both took effect.
Interesting. Okay, let me add like a bug report. Can you jot that down, maybe Cody or David, just to avoid multiple instances? I know that I thought we did it, but if we don't, that's probably something we want to add in to avoid that.
Sorry for the double question.
No, that's good. So we know. So yes, it's very. I don't know how I'm switching to different tabs here, but yeah, we know it's a big ask. It would require a lot of engineering time to have like a remote instance, because we'd have to be thinking about things like, what methods are we going to use to remotely authenticate. So it comes down to, at what point does it make sense to spend the time to develop a remote console to connect in, where our goal is primarily, hopefully, once it gets set up, you're not really touching it much, versus kind of working on these additional features. So we definitely understand, like, hey, this would provide a lot of value, but it's kind of prioritizing how much engineering time will we put in that versus maybe some of these other features that we have. So good ask. We definitely know that it's a common request.
On that topic, as far as like the engineering, I clearly don't know how you're writing your product. That's clearly your personal, like that's what your whole market and business and stuff is. Configuration Manager does have this component of it. It's like the PS1D file that you can import, and it actually lets you send commands remotely to Configuration Manager. So I have been testing like PowerShell scripts where it can actually pull and create applications. Not the same way that Patch My PC does, but the end result is very similar, and that works on a machine that's not it. And do you know what I mean when I'm talking about the import
absolutely.
module?
So from an application perspective, we could work remotely from the provider. The reason that we require the application to be on the software update point, if you're using the updates feature here, is because the WSUS APIs. So we want to make sure that the APIs that we use when we're publishing WSUS updates match the same APIs that the WSUS server is running. So for example, hypothetically, like we could work on a remote server that has RSAT for WSUS, but if your version that you're running on like Windows 10 is newer, and let's say your WSUS is 2012 or 2016, there could be potential API conflicts where we haven't fully tested to understand the workflow of that. So if you were only using Config Manager apps, for instance, and you could put your provider any remote server, like that would work totally fine remote. The main reason that it's currently on the software update point is required when you use updates to make sure that we're calling the same exact WSUS APIs that we're publishing to if it were remote. So that's kind of the reason from like installing the SUP, why we do that.
Great. Thank you so much.
But that doesn't mean that we couldn't have like a remote tool to remotely connect into like the setup on the software update point, which is that user voice. So I would definitely say subscribe to that one. Can somebody paste the link in there? We know that a lot of people want it. We just know it's going to be super complex and would take a lot of time. And how do we want to balance that versus maybe other requests is where we're at this point. But great question. Okay, so next one on the PowerPoint was related to drivers. So we'll skip that one. I know we already covered that. So let's go to Alan, if you want to unmute.
Sure, thanks guys. So currently we run Patch My PC on our primary SUP on-prem in our config man environment, but our company has dedicated themselves to moving everything, our entire data center, up into the cloud, into AWS and Azure. So this kind of relates a little bit to Spencer's question with running the Patch My PC service. Is there plans to allow that or can get it configured so we can run it as an Azure service as opposed to running on top of a VM.
Would this be specific to Intune or?
Yeah, eventually. Right now we're in pilot mode. We're eventually going to be going 100% Intune. So eventually.
Yeah. So for Intune, it's definitely something that we want to look at. So from like an evolution perspective, the way that the publisher kind of came out is we started with the updates feature, right? So it was always on-prem, publishing updates to Config Manager. Then next piece that came out was the apps for Config Manager. And then really the Intune go-to-market, like we were trying to get it out there pretty quickly. So what we ended up doing is using the same utility that's on-prem. So, Intune came out, this would have been March 2020. Intune updates came out in August. So really to fast track that, rather than rebuilding the entire service in the cloud, we kind of tied on a lot of the processes that we had in the publisher today. But with that said, like it's kind of a goal that we know, hey, this is a big ask from customers, especially it's going to make sense for customers cloud only. So we do have a user voice for that. We know it's going to take quite a bit of time, but it's definitely one that we're paying very close attention to is how would we create like a publishing to auto-populate for a Azure service or Azure app type thing. So definitely something that we're thinking about there.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, it's we're not going to get to it tomorrow, that's for sure.
If anybody has the user voice for that, if you could paste it in, then you can subscribe and vote on it. And then if there's ever any progress or change in the status, that would let you know right away. I'm not sure the term that we have for it, but it's a pretty popular one for sure.
Cloud portal. Helps if I don't put ZV. There it is. Cool. I pasted it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
So we'll paste that. And I think we also have another one that's similar, so we'll merge those as well.
Sec.
Because I think...
Yeah, there it is. Now I have the right one.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, and let's merge those ideas so we can have the votes count for both, because I think one of them had quite a few more. Okay, let's go to... Let's see what we got here. Let's do another voice one since we've got people on. I can't see the full name here. Alexander, I think. Oh, Alexander's. Would you want to come off unmute?
Yeah, hello. Thank you for the event. It's very informative. I have maybe a small question. It's related to this current directory variable in the Cisco example. I was wondering, are you planning to add some more variables like current dir so it can be slightly more flexible?
So
Cody, more variables in the like command line.
What would you want? Like what variables would you be interested in having?
Like I basically maybe like some like Windows variables, so it can parse Windows variables as well. I was trying like user domain to apply some settings based on the user location, but it failed. It just like read it as plain text.
Okay, gotcha. So like built-in systems like %temp, user dir, things like that is something that you'd be interested in?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this is the first time. Has anyone else heard of this? Is this new to everyone?
I don't think it's an idea that we have in there now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it is.
So if you could submit a new idea here, that would at least get it so we know, hey, this is important for somebody. And then, we've got, I think, still about 80, 90 people on the call. So if you're strategic, you can maybe post the link of your new idea in the chat, and you might get quite a few votes compared to, if you didn't have all these people. So, I would say submit it here, and let's see what we can do and how we would prioritize that. Okay, let's do Rick Jones.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. I actually have a user voice submitted. I just want to know if there's anything going on with it. Pre and post for uninstalls would be very helpful for us.
This would be command lines
I'm
and
gonna say we've
scripts.
got it.
Okay, so
marked as
it's
planned.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think we
It's right
I think
here.
we added to the roadmap
550.
on Monday. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Is this your idea here, or the one you voted on?
Either that or I put in a new one. I don't remember. It's COVID brain, so I couldn't even begin to tell you.
So was the ask though to give like custom command lines or scripts in the uninstall of the?
Yeah.
Okay.
The ability to do pre and post scripts for the uninstall like you do for the install.
Okay. Cool. So I'm not sure if you maybe submitted another one, but this is essentially the same ask, and we do have it planned.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I'll include the URL to this one just in case you're not subscribed to it. And then once we find yours, we'll merge it into that existing one. But this is one that we do have planned. So I don't know. Let's see if I add it to the roadmap. I'd say hopefully probably
Allegedly, I'm supposed to do it this month.
Oh, okay. So if you
next month, March.
If you don't see it by March or whenever Cody had it, you can go tweet him and ask him what's going on. Yeah, here it is. So
It's set for next month.
yeah, so Cody's assigned to it for March. So if it's not done by then, let's all bother Cody on Twitter. I think it's at Cody123, Cody Mathis 123. So let's be sure to bug him if it's not there.
Thank you.
Okay, let's do John Wright.
If I can unmute. Hey, so quick question. And I might just be missing something here. The best way it came up with the Flash uninstaller option. What's the best way to just push out an uninstaller? Is that basically have it build the installer application and use the uninstall from that? But if we wanted to like push out a mass uninstall for software.
For any random app in Patch My PC?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. I would just build the app and push it out. I will say we are working on, so for MSIs, it might not work the best because we fill in the MSI product code as the uninstall, but we're actually going to be changing that relatively soon. And we're going to change that to be, to actually look for the app within like the uninstall reg hive. And then from there, we'll be able to uninstall any version of the app.
Yeah. It's always good to have those mirror your updates, and that way you've always got a rollback method.
Cool.
Exactly. That was kind of my thoughts on it. So appreciate that.
Yeah, and we do have a KB about this, I think. Patch My PC.
I just pasted it.
Okay,
It's
awesome.
called rollback.
Awesome.
It's in the chat.
But yeah, so the app uninstall is going to be definitely a good option for that, and we're going to try to make it more flexible, like Andrew was saying, where even if it's not the same version and it's an MSI, we can still uninstall like newer or older versions regardless of the version of the app that we have. So that's something we do have on the roadmap, so we can even be more flexible in that removal to basically get rid of anything regardless of version. Okay, let's do Donald. Do you want to come off mute? Not sure if you're off mute. Don't hear you yet. Okay. Maybe he's not here. So let's go to Michael, and then we can come back if you re-raise your hand.
Hi. Couple questions about migration packages. I know there's a migration package for Java for JRE, but there's a few others that would fit that category. Nitro PDF, you could have 3 different versions of Nitro. That one would obviously be a licensing situation where would you need to be licensed for the migration from 11 to 13 or 12 to 13. And then the other one is, it looks like VMware Horizon added, there's 2 generations right now, a 5 and an 8 generation. Any plans on like a migration package from the 5s to the 8s?
Good question. So I would probably say probably not. The reason for that is so the functionality of our products become a lot more expansive from when we did Java migrations for the update. So if you want to go from 6 or 7 to 8, So basically what I mean by that is, let's say Nitro for your example. Now that we have, actually, let me jump over to the apps. Now that we have Config Manager apps, this gives us a lot more flexibility in targeting. So for example, let's say that you wanted to go from 11 and 12 to 13. What would be a good method? Like even if it wasn't like an auto removal of the old one, you could get very flexible. So you could say maybe a prescript that would remove version 12 and 11, and then that would automatically execute before the version 13 got installed. So there's a lot more capability to do migrations in the app model, as well as having the flexibility of scripts. So I'd say we probably won't add a lot of migrations for ones that don't migrate smoothly. Like for example, you may have major versions of products that just upgrade in place, and that's totally fine. But if it's a licensed products, I'd probably say we're going to be less building that in now that we have the capability for you to be very flexible in the way that you target and the customizations that you add in there.
Okay, makes sense.
Rick Jones?
Yeah, now I'm just getting greedy. Would it be possible to add in a credentials field for software that's behind a paywall, like Acrobat?
I think our concern there is probably just consistency, and I mean having to rely on whether like vendors to provide an API to authenticate to actually get this content. And I mean, I don't think we would want to go down some programmatic way of filling out online forms. So it's tough. If you are aware of vendors that provide an API that accepts like tokens or something, that would be interesting. I'm definitely open to exploring that. But we've got to be pretty sure that anything we work with is not going to change.
Yeah, understandable. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think another tough factor there is understanding how to present that in a way that would work for all users, right? So, I mean, it becomes pretty tough. So, yeah, just let us know if there's like any specifics around a product that you have, but definitely, it's not something that's on the radar to move the current way that we do local content, I would say.
I will say, though, with the local content, it does kind of work out at least as nice as we can make it. So for Java, for example, if you have the alerting set up, you're going to get emails or Teams alerts when our catalog gets updated and you don't have the local content. So you're still able to hopefully get your software updating pretty quickly, right? Java releases from our catalog, a sync happens, we fail to find local content, you're going to get an alert that says, hey, you need to go get this file, this version. And then you can go quickly populate that file in the local content repository and do a sync. So it's kind of the middle ground we've hit right now.
Yeah, and the local content repository works well. It's just trying to be lazy.
Totally get that. Okay, let's do Trevor. So we're right about 30 minutes over. So once again, if you guys have time limits, feel free to jump off. Totally fine. But we'll do a couple more here. Trevor, you want to come off unmute?
Yeah, hi. It was actually a follow-on question to the one that's just asked. I was thinking of asking it separately, but what I was going to ask is there a way, or could you build in a feature to kind of have a hook to a script at the beginning of the whole process, so that we could write our own scripts to go off and get code from Cisco Anywhere or those kind of files, or Dropbox or Mimecast, all those sort of things. If those companies provide a way of automating that download, we can manage creating that code to go and get it, but we just need something to hook in to this process so we don't have to manually go and get it or manually trigger the scripts.
Yeah.
So it's kind of related to that point that was just made, that a different way of solving the problem perhaps, where you don't have to write the code, you just have to give us the hook.
Yeah, so I would say that's definitely doable today. Basically, the way our content repo works is you point to a directory that you want us to search out. So for example, Java is one that requires a local download. So if you had a script that could understand licensed products, and there's only about 3 or 4 in our catalog, and it could auto download it, all you would really have to do is say, let's download it into this location that we're checking for, and then it should just automatically detect it. as long as that binary exists there. So I would think that would be something that you could certainly script in today, and you would just make sure that wherever you're putting that content, whatever UNC or file share, that's where your scripts that automate the downloading is putting it, and then it should just work right away.
And I think you could trigger it off Windows events. Do we generate an event when we start syncing an event viewer? I'm not sure off the top of my head if we generate an event every time we publish something or fail to publish something, but you could, if we do base one off when we fail to update something, you could possibly do a scheduled task based on that event, and then do that. That's
a couple of good ideas. Think of that.
I'm gonna actually write this down.
So here,
I might make a scheduled task thing off of this.
So here's the events that we write today.
Oh, perfect. Let's see.
There's a failed to make. I don't know if there's one for like a local content file not being found, but that's something we could.
I don't think there is.
We could certainly add. So if you did want to have like an event that would trigger a script,
yeah.
Like I think that we could make that easier.
There's a handful of ways around it too. In the event that we don't get that rolling soon, it wouldn't be too hard to parse the log and hit the log line that says we can't find local content. You can also read the Teams channel that you publish the webhooks to and catch those same events. So, you can get creative, but I think it's an interesting idea, though, that we could provide sometime. I think the event would probably be the quickest for us. We could toss an event that you could trigger off of.
Excellent. That's food for thought there. I'm sure we can spin something up based on some of that. Cheers for that. Thanks.
All right, Wayne, come off unmute.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for having this, and I appreciate the product quite a bit. We're still just getting off the ground. I did have a couple. I wasn't going to ask these, and then you guys are so kind to stay on for so much longer. I thought, well, I'll just throw them out there. You recently added the categories checkboxes for the config manager apps, and that's been a real bonus for us because we do use those categories. And I was just wondering, and this is just sort of selfishness, is it possible for you guys to also add the ability for us to plug in owners, support contacts for those same types of parameters that are available in the config manager apps? We do fill those in.
So we do provide like app name. Yeah, so that's actually interesting.
I know it's probably not a huge ask for people, outside of us, but we actually use those fields to because we have many packagers, and we want to identify who's actually doing the work.
So this would be like
that's interesting.
These.
So yeah, right
here.
there, the owners and support contacts. I mean, it's fabulous. You have no idea how much of an impact being able to check those boxes for the categories, because when you duplicate an app in ECM, it does not carry I believe it doesn't carry the software center categories, or it doesn't carry the first set of categories, and it does carry the other. So we have to go in and modify them, and it's a pain in the neck. But having us be able to do it from Patch My PC is a real bonus for us.
Yeah,
interesting.
So if that's something, if you guys need me to submit something for that, I'm happy to.
Yeah,
do
could
it.
you submit an idea and then send me an email? So this is one where I kind of like I don't want to speak too soon, but I think it could be a pretty quick one. But that's got me in the past. But send me an email to it. I think it could be a pretty easy one that we could probably implement pretty quick. And that's one of the fun things, like thinking about how we ship things. So, sometimes those small, easy ones may not get a ton of votes, but if it's something that an engineer sees, he's like, oh, this could be quick. I see the value in it. Submit it all the time. Like, Because like votes don't necessarily mean this has to get X number of votes. Some of the easy ones that we see provide a lot of value. Like there could be one vote. We have plenty of items with one vote shipped. So this would be, just give me that one. I think that could be a quick one.
I will. I'm gonna throw on one more here. Under the requirements tab for the operating system, I noticed that you guys select by default all Windows operating systems, and that's a mess for us. I would like to suggest either none. Maybe that's not a good situation. I'm sorry. Is there an actual feature for that? You just brought up a.
We have a feature that'll let you set the 32-bit requirement for 32-bit apps, but it just does the flip of what the 64-bit one does. It'll select all 32-bit OS. So we did talk internally about expanding this, and it's kind of I think we still would want to maintain setting the 64-bit rec because we do have customers that have 32-bit apps. We could do it differently, but yeah. So I mean,
and again, it's personal. It's right. So there, I've got to go in and I've got to pare that down. We only deploy to Windows 10 systems. And again, that's an on-site thing for us. But having to go in there and make sure that all these other ones are unchecked, it makes us have to have more thought.
So you want something, you basically want this option as a right click where you can control the requirements more specifically for OSs, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, for us, having everything checked is as bad as having nothing checked.
Okay, gotcha. So for 64-bit, we basically, the way it works today is we look through the entire list and anything that contains 64-bit, we basically check. So totally get the use case. I would say let's get an idea for it.
Sure.
Because this is like Cody was saying, this is one where we want to think about could we open up and show basically replicate some of these requirements from Config Manager to give you more flexibility, so you don't have to go in after the fact. So definitely a good request.
Yeah, and that's how the categories piece struck me. It was like, wow, this is great that I can select these right now and not have to worry about missing them in Config Manager later if I have to go back in there to follow up on them. And then the thought hit me that the operating system selections, it would be nice to do that up front. So great. All right. I will put those in
a pinch, and who knows how long it'll take us to get that feature out. If you guys are pretty savvy with PowerShell and automation, you can trigger a status filter rule after category changes, and then go find the app that had a category change, right? So you could associate a category with all your 64-bit apps and Patch My PC, and you could associate one with all your 32-bit apps and Patch My PC, trigger a status filter rule, and go adjust those requirements with PowerShell. Just getting creative, right? I mean, it's an option to save you some trouble. I've worked with some people before around doing category-based status filter rules. I would definitely recommend hitting SQL for the detection of those changes, just because it's kind of a tough one it's very slow via the SMS provider, but it's definitely doable.
Yeah, interesting idea. I appreciate it. And hey, quick shout out to Wes for his help with Irfan View. Thank you.
Nice.
All right, I'm good. Thanks, guys.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Let's take one last question if anyone does want to come off on mute. Looks like we are probably good then. I guess lastly, just want to, we have one more. Ryan, just in time.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, since this did run way beyond the scheduled time, was anybody recording this, and is it going to be made available for later?
Yeah, the Teams meeting is being recorded. So the recording, I would say, let's go over to Patch My PC. If you go to Patch My PC, at the bottom, we have a YouTube link on all the pages. So it will probably go up here.
A new security.
Under playlist, we have like a third party. We have webinars and events. Maybe? Yes, this will probably be where you can find it. So it will be recorded, or it was recorded. You should have seen the little recording bar. Hopefully that should have notified everyone. And we'll post that up so you can have it after the fact for sure. And
Justin, did we
okay, great.
finish up all the pre-submitted ones?
Yeah.
Questions.
I don't know if we did.
Yeah, there might be a few more here. Let's see.
We can go through them. We may have hit most of them.
Okay, let's jump on the. Do we have Matt here that submitted this question? I don't think so. We might need a little more context. So let's see what else we have here. Set it and forget it. So this was one from Julie. Julie, looking to get more info on Patch My PC. I think Wes kind of hit this one as well at the beginning. So we do have those free setup calls. So if you want to make sure you get in a good state where everything's totally automated, that could definitely be a good option.
What I'd say there too is this depends on the environment. Sometimes when you have a large number of third-party apps, you will start to see little issues with patching third-party apps, right? Because there's a large variance with all of these. Some of them need to be closed. Some of them have configs that need applied that you didn't even know about because it's part of your app package from 6 years ago. But once you get over some of those initial hurdles, it is set and forget, and you'll get the occasional hiccup or help desk ticket just because there's so much variance.
Let's see. Okay, next one. This one was about upgrading config manager and getting some unknown client scanning. Cody, I know that we just had a call on this. Do you want to maybe hit that one? I'll bring up the KB of like kind of how unknown can happen.
Yeah, the big one that happens for unknown, we've had a few customers that have had this kind of recently, one just the other day. The most common cause is a group policy conflict for your sub. So, and you'll see that get shown in like the WUA handler or scan agent logs. You'll have a GPO that's setting your WSUS server to some other server that's not the right one, or it could just be that it's using the wrong port in the GPO. And then you'll also have software updates enabled within SCCM, and you'll see that error pop up with a conflict, and that is one of the big causes of the unknowns. One of the other ones is, that update compliance information all relies on state messaging. So you've got to make sure your state message kind of infrastructure is healthy. There's I think it's like state message.log on the client. It's a good one to check. Between state message.log and then like CCM messaging.log on the client, it's kind of your communication logs for to the MP and then state messages in general. So sometimes it's just a general client health issue. Other times you've got some backlogs on your inboxes on your site server, so it's choking and can't process the full list. There's a range of things, but more common for our customers is the GPO conflict.
Yeah, I think that one probably makes. I'm pretty sure that's probably what it is in this case, because you mentioned. I'm not sure if. Here we go. I'm not sure if you're still on the call, but you mentioned you did install like a new WSUS server, so there's probably a good chance your GPO is pointing to the old one, and clients can't scan. Okay, I think the last one here was around API integration for CVEs. Do we still have, I think I just got a first initial here. Do we still have this person on for the call? Okay, maybe not. So we did introduce a CVE feature a couple months ago. Right now, basically the way it works is like your security team could give you a list of CVEs. It's just a CSV file or even a text file. Here's an example of one that we use. Actually, hold on. I think this is on the wrong machine here. So basically you come in, you click CVE scan here, and then you can browse out to a CVE file and then just click process. And the way that this works is, if we look at this, we can just see, like, I think this was a Nexus scan with just exported CVE list. And we basically parsed Nessus. Yep. Not super familiar with most security products. Thanks, Andrew. But basically we parse the file for CVEs. And then what we do, we scan against the updates in WSUS. We scan against any updates that could potentially be published from our environment. and then we scan against ones that could be unknown. So it's a way that you can at least understand, like, hey, I see the CVE and I have a fix, and then you can import updates for specific CVEs on the fly if they're not already published. So this was kind of the first step. Probably would want to get some more context about specifically how an API would look, what you would need to query. But today we don't have an API to query against that.
And I think the next logical step for us is to just scan that same CSV file over and over again.
Yeah, so you can update it regularly. I could see a use case for a type of API where you pass it CVE IDs and then it would publish those, right? So instead of the scan, I guess it depends. If we introduce scheduled scanning, I don't know, maybe you do or don't want an API at that point. Yeah, there's kind of been a few API-related questions we've gotten, and it's definitely something that we're interested in. Understanding customer use cases and what they would want is good, though, because APIs, it's a lot of work. We want to make sure if we do it, it's usable by the people that request it.
Here's one I think I missed. This is probably the last one I think that we didn't cover. Are you planning to give the ability to kind of create your own apps where you just specify something? This is a popular user voice. Any thoughts, Andrew, on like challenges there and what we're thinking?
I wasn't paying attention.
So this is the one about ScriptRunner for deploying like custom in-house apps.
Oh, not today.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a tough one.
There's so much variation. It's kind of hard.
And I think the biggest challenge is probably how do we know how to detect that app in an automated fashion? So one thing that we're potentially thinking about in the future is specifically for Intune, I think is where this could provide some value for customers if they're not familiar with the whole Win32 packaging and having to get the content tool, is maybe giving like a wizard where you point to a folder where you have like installer files and you put like maybe a command line and a detection and we package it up and maybe upload it. That's one thing that we're thinking about internally. There's a lot of variables here, so I don't know if it's ever going to be like you point to this file and we just create an app, because there's some complexity there around detection methods and things like that. Okay, well, let's do this last one from George. And I think at that point, I think we'll be good. Simus.
Thank you, Justin. Hello. Yep, thank you, Justin. That last question was asked by me, actually. That's what I wanted to, to say a little bit about it.
Okay.
It would be nice because you have a nice framework there. You have nice PowerShell scripts that do the detection stuff. So I wasn't asking for the completely user-friendly way, but at least if you are considering of giving us a way to leverage all this functionality you're providing us now in an automated way, but if we could use it, it would be nice.
So
that's why I've asked it.
I will say
you're
this.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I will say this. Well, the framework for Patch My PC, I'm making a tool internally to kind of help ease creating new apps for the catalog. If I get that perfect, we might consider adding it as sort of a tool that you can use to add products to maybe some sort of like local catalog for your device. But it needs to be pretty foolproof, because if not, then we'll get support questions on it, and it's hard enough to support the products that we have in our own catalog. So that's for that. ScriptRunner I can't talk to.
With regards to using ScriptRunner or our detection scripts, you're more than welcome to use those, yourself, right? The detection script just has some parameters that you can fill out up top, and then test if it works for the application you're packaging. There may be alternatives or better ways that work in your environment. We've just kind of created a script that works for the applications which we're managing. So you're welcome to use it. And then for ScriptRunner, we don't have a formal doc that lays out, the XML and the command lines at this time, but I think that you could likely reference your existing updates that you have inside of WSUS by looking at like the command lines, and you could also reference the package.xml that's packaged alongside software, and you could probably get a good handle on what you can edit to use ScriptRunner. So ultimately, ScriptRunner has it either uses the package.xml, which has a command line node, or it takes that same set of parameters just as direct parameters after scriptrunner.exe. So you can definitely investigate using it if you like.
Yeah, and just for those of you that don't know what we're referring to with ScriptRunner, basically it's what makes these right-click actions work on the client side. So it's kind of like a wrapper customization that when you go and say, I want to disable an update, I want to enable logging, I want to do command lines, MSTs, it's basically on the client side how we understand how to make that all happen, where you only have to do a single click and like we go and we do all this stuff for you. So that's what we're referring to when we say that. Okay, awesome. So we're just about 50 some minutes over. So this this was just so awesome. We had to keep going. So I think with the interest here and the amount of questions that we got, next time we'll probably mark out maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours. And internally, we're still kind of thinking like, what's the frequency that would make sense for this, where we could get a lot of customers, but still keep it small enough that we're in a Teams meeting and we can still come off on mute. We're tossing around some ideas, but maybe thinking quarterly, we do kind of like an Ask Us Anything event where, people can register as customers and, get on this. So hopefully this was valuable for everyone. We will make that recording available. I know that was a question. And hopefully this gave you some insights in what we do internally, how we think about features, how we think about products, how the customer feedback flow works. And outside of that, just thanks again, and I hope to see you at the next one.